This is episode 14 of ScottCast, the podcast. My name is Michael Clark, sitting here with Scott Brown. And on this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about people's view of money and building net worth. Because I think a lot of times people get this confused a little bit about what's important and what's not. Really, to boil it down, what drives the needle when it comes to money, and what are some of the things that maybe we think matter but don't really matter. And you talk a lot in your book about this exact topic, and you talk about some of the kind of funny things that we think matter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's again, another common topic in this country is wealth inequality, right? And what is it that the wealthy get that the rest of us don't get? And you know, people have been taught, it's a weird dynamic, you know, we're taught to be, I write in the book in one chapter that we've been taught, whether it's in high school or college or by our parents or our peers or whatever, to be two things by and large, to be employees and to be consumers, right? So we believe that those are the two avenues to wealth, that being an employee that gets a raise every year, 3%, whatever it is somehow a path to wealth. And we also believe as consumers that if we consume wisely, that is a path to wealth, right? So the person who gets a 4% raise believes, well, that's the path to wealth.
Yeah.
It's not. Now you're just got an extra $50 and you're going to blow it tomorrow anyway. On the next part, which is the consumerism, right? So we've been taught the whole keep up with the Joneses thing is cliche at this point, but it persists.
Absolutely.
People continue to behave in that fashion. And what's annoying about that and frustrating to people is that they've been taught if they sit down Saturday morning after having worked all week and they go clip coupons, however you do that now, I'm sure it's electronic, on the intranets, and they clip coupons and they go to Publix. Publix is a grocery store here in Orlando, and they're going to buy their $200 worth of weekly groceries. And if they save $25 by having clip coupons, they literally sat down back when I was a kid, cut it out with the scissors, that if they spent 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours figuring that $25 out, that was how they were going to get wealthy because they had outsmarted the person next to them in the line who didn't do that. That is nonsense. You are not going to get wealthy clipping coupons. Yes, I'm not saying and people who are watching this are going to go all straw man on me and say, oh, he's saying you should just spend. No, I'm not saying that person. What I'm saying is that the side hustle, the more thoughtful consuming in so much as that you're not consuming, right? Those are the ways you become wealthy. So, you know, example I give, I think somewhere in the book, is if you clipped coupons and you saved that $25 at Publix, well, what if you took that 5 hours and drove an Uber, or that 4 hours? You'd probably end up 4 times ahead, right? You'd probably make $400 or $500.
Right.
So we've taught people that's going to a sale. You know, how many times have you heard, I could not buy it? It was on sale. How could I not buy it? Well, you could just not buy it. That's how you can do that. The side hustle or starting a business on the side or you know, working part-time somewhere else at night or whatever it is till you get to where you want to be. Because if you went out, there's a story in there about a gentleman who I can't remember exactly where he was from. I want to say Morocco, who I met. Whenever I get in an Uber, I strike up a conversation, which drives my wife insane. They don't want to talk to you. Yes, they do. So I struck up a conversation. This guy was like decked out. I mean, he looked fantastic. His car was clean. You could have eaten off the floor. And we got to talking. He was taking us to the airport. And I said, oh, you know, do you drive full time? He said, no. He said, I drive on the weekends. I said, oh, what do you do during the week? He's like, I work at the prison in Sebring. Well, Sebring, for those of you who don't understand the Orlando area, is 100 miles from Orlando.
Right, pretty far.
So he worked at the prison during the week, and I said, you know, because I'm nosy, I said, well, how much money do you make doing each? And he said, I make about the same. A little bit more at his prison job, but he almost doubled his income by spending the weekend doing that. So here's an immigrant who barely spoke the language, was dressed to the nine, his car was clean as a whistle, and he's probably making twice what his peers at the prison are because they're going home and clipping coupons or shopping for a sale, right? Now, hopefully he won't have to do that forever, but if he saved up $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000, maybe then he would start his own business or he would do other things. And he would have, if you had $50,000 as your corpus to start with, obviously it's better than having 500 or whatever. It's meaningful, I guess, is my point.
Sure.
So the side hustle is a big one for me. If people ask how I can get, I don't mind saying when I started in the investment business a few years ago, I was unloading trucks. I bring up Publix again. I was unloading trucks at Publix from midnight till 7 in the morning. I would go home. I would sleep for about an hour and a half. I would put on my little Sears and Roebuck tie and my suits that probably cost $40 that I wore every day pretty much. And I built an investment career. I didn't go unload trucks, come home and go, well, how can I save money on bologna this week?
Right.
Yeah. So that is a big misconception people have.
Yeah. I mean, Publix does do a good job. This sounds like a Publix commercial at this point.
It's really not, but we do love Publix.
Because they have this buy one, get one free.
They
and
do.
You get all caught up in the minutiae.
And the great subs.
Right.
Anyway, we digress.
But I can see how people get caught up in the, wait a minute, that one's buy one, get one free. Give me the free thing.
Yeah.
And they translate that into, well, I got my check mark for my finances this week.
I did good.
Right, I did good. So that's it. I'm good till next week.
I'll be rich for sure.
Right. So we do certainly get mixed up just as human beings in that minutia and almost the, neat, I don't want to say neatness, but the whole, you feel good.
You do. Because you get beat on. Every ad in the newspaper, you and I were talking about shopping for cars, and I have a friend that's notorious for shopping for cars for a month or two or three. And it's not to diminish the savings when I'm about to save $1,000 or $2. That's not insignificant. I get that. But if you're a person who makes $100 an hour, $50 an hour even, and you say, well, I'm going to buy a car and I'm going to shop all over town, and there's 7 dealerships in the Central Florida area, and you're going to go to every one. You're going to pit them against each other. You're going to arm wrestle the sales manager. It's going to be great. You're going to kick some butt.
You're going to win.
You're going to win. You're not going to win, by the way, in a car dealership, I promise you. You just want to lose a little less. But the point being is if you spend 2 or 3 or 4 weeks doing that of your time, let's say you spent 40, 80 hours on that, forget the Consumer Digest that you bought and the 8 people you interviewed and whatever, you've probably spent, for a person making $50 or $100 an hour, you might have spent $7,000 or $8,000 of your time to save $1,000 on a car.
Right, yeah.
And again, I'm not advocating for walking in and saying, take advantage of me, because they'll be happy to do that. What I'm saying is don't overplay that hand, and a lot of people do. They do it with houses. It's funny, I watch these housing shows sometimes, these real estate shows, and they're going back and forth for months, and people are walking away from the table for $500 on a $700,000 house. I'm like, what? You're buying a $700,000 house and you're leaving over $500?
Right, yeah.
Financed over 30 years at 4%. Okay, that's 53 cents.
Yeah.
Really? But again, that's what we've been taught. We've been taught to fight and conquer and win.
Sure.
You're not winning.
Right.
You are not winning. The side hustle, starting a business, consuming just less on the whole is how you win.
Yeah, and then the consuming side, I feel like it's getting harder and harder just with social media, because you're seeing everybody's highlights and everybody's trips, all the new stuff they're buying, all the cool stuff they're doing with their kids, and it's hard to not feel like you're missing out.
Well, it's the peer pressure is certainly ratcheted up quite a bit because of social media. You're like you said, you see everybody's highlight reel.
Yeah.
What? He got what? I'm going to get a better one of those, whatever that is. No, I get it. It's a discipline. You have to discipline yourself. It's pardon the expression, it's a false god. I mean, I was just talking to somebody the other day about when I bought my first new car and how excited I was. You buy your first new car and it smells good, and it's one of those things where you park it away from everybody else's car, and then when you get out at home, you look back at it. That looks good in the driveway. And then you go, I got to go back in and check something. And then you rearrange some stuff, and you're just as excited as you can be. By week 3, you could give a crap. You're parking it in the middle of a dirt field. You just don't care.
Eating French fries in it.
Yes, yeah. There's a Big Mac wrapper in the back. So it's, again, if you can have the wherewithal to understand that about yourself and understand the pressures that we're under as Americans especially, although I think we've exported it to other countries, you're welcome. The stupid that we do with money, I think if you can just get a grasp of that and understand the basics of consumerism, you're not going to clip coupon. You're not going to get to wealth by clipping coupons. I think you'll be ahead of most people.
Yeah, well, let's finish by talking a little bit about the practical actions people can take. You know, we've both done a lot of speaking on 401k, saving and accumulating wealth in retirement plans. I mean, obviously that's an easy go-to. Well, use the 401k at your job, slowly save over time, try to increase by 1% per year. These are all great ways to save and build wealth over time.
Right.
Another thing that people look at, I think they miss out on this, is if you pay off debt, well, that's increasing your net worth.
Yes.
You know, and I think a lot of times people don't necessarily look at it that way in terms of the actual balance sheet.
Yeah.
They just look at, oh, what is my 401k balance? And they kind of forget about the whole net worth equation.
That balance sheet example is fantastic because that's really where the financial planning comes in. I know oftentimes when you and I do our meetings for the first time with a new client, and we get to the end because we've done all the research and okay, you got money there, you did this, you saved there, you do that, you owe this, and they get to the end and we present them with a balance sheet, and oftentimes they're like, what is this? What do you mean, what is this? It's your net worth. This is what you owe, this is what you own, right? And we subtract that from that, and that's what you're worth. Huh. I thought I was worth $700,000. No, because you have $800,000 in debt, right? So that's math. And so that is a dynamic people do fail to recognize or appreciate is the paying off of debt is such a satisfying thing. First of all, it's freeing. It allows your mind, like anything else, if you're overburdened in your mind, you can't think. Well, if you're overburdened in debt, your finances can't move forward. So, yeah, I think that's certainly something people need to do a better job of understanding and evaluating. The other thing I would say is talking about 401ks. You know, it's fashionable now to pick on 401ks. The irony, of course, is that in the 70s, when Congress politicians created 401ks. Now, if you listen to Congress and politicians, they hate the 401k that they created, right? So it's fashionable for a newspaper or a magazine or a reporter to say 401ks are a ripoff. Great. So what do we do? Right? You say, okay, well, maybe 401ks aren't perfect. Sometimes, you know, and the one that comes up is fees, right? They're expensive. Well, in the 30 years I've been dealing with it, the fees have come down about 150%. They're not going to get much lower. So they're not free, but they're not bad.
Yeah.
The other part of it is employer matches and things like that if in many cases in a 401k, if you put $1, not all cases, Mr. Lawyer, calm yourself. In many cases, if you put $1 in a 401k, somebody's going to throw 30 cents on top of it. Right. Where else can you go and get 30% on your money the second that you deposit it? So it's not perfect. There are warts. But I also just read recently that there are literally hundreds of thousands of 401k millionaires now over the last decade having saved and grown their nest egg. So you're telling me those people are stupid? Right. The people who don't have anything in a 401k and don't have a nest egg are smarter than the people who have $1 million in a 401k? It's just a silly argument. Again, not saying they're perfect. But if you have the opportunity to save tax deductibly or tax free in the case of a Roth, right? You pay the taxes up front, but it's tax free from then on, and have a match put on it and have the opportunity for capital markets to grow that money over an extended period of time. I personally have retired dozens of millionaires who got all of their wealth from their 401k. So I think if you give people a reason not to save, they'll take it.
Yeah.
So if a person picks up my book and it says the 401k ripoff or whatever, because I know there's a book out there called that, you're going to be like, well, there you go. It's a ripoff. I don't need to save.
Yeah.
And I'll just go spend the money. I'll go clip coupons.
So those are some thoughts from Chapter 1 from Scott's book, I've Never Made Anyone Rich. You can pick up a copy on Amazon. But yeah, it is funny how we view money, how we view, clipping coupons or shopping for a car, or perhaps not looking at the overall balance sheet between assets and liabilities. So again, this was Chapter 1. You can pick up Scott's book on Amazon, I've Never Made Anybody Rich.
And you're welcome.
Tell me now, like you told me back then, that we'll be together till the end.